Well, yeah, so as my audience probably knows that my name's Dylan. This is my professor. Well, you can introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Professor Patrick Gallagher. I teach American history at the Community College of Vermont, Winooski campus.
Awesome. Yeah, so we just wrapped up a class, full semester of history from 1865 forward, U.S. history, so that was really fun. So I guess first off, I just want to say thanks so much
It's my pleasure.
for the awesome class. That was really cool. So along those lines, I was kind of curious to ask you. I actually never got the chance during class. Like, what is a little bit of your story about like how you got involved in history and like what inspired your love for that?
The story I usually tell is that my life was poisoned by Ken Burns at a very early age. I'm from the Northeast Kingdom, the northeast part of this state, and we didn't have cable growing up. So this is back in the analog days. So for TV we had whatever was over the air broadcast. And where my parents live and still live, they don't even get these anymore because when everything went digital, they lost the reception. But back then there was 2.5 commercial channels you could get. One of them, the third, if the antenna was exactly the right position, and 2 public TV. So I watched a lot of public TV as a kid, insofar as I was allowed to watch much TV. And in 89 or 90, I forget which, Ken Burns' The Civil War, his big breakout documentary came out. And I was already interested in the Civil War by that point, but it hit PBS, and during the opening scrawl with that plaintive violin music in the background, I basically was lost forever from that point on. I didn't know it yet, but I'd already been interested to a degree in it, but it really was Ken Burns' documentary more than anything else that first made me a Civil War nut, and then more broadly expanded out from there.
Wow. Okay. So that kind of like sparked it for you, and then just kept going down that road.
Well, Again, I didn't 100% know it at the time, and my freshman year of college, I actually was a chemistry major. I did terribly, because I don't know. I imagine it's likely been the same for someone your age, but for people my age, the joke was always, if you go into the humanities, you end up working fast food. What does the English major say to you after they graduate? Would you like fries with that? Ha ha ha. But the idea was you need a science degree or a business degree. Everybody else, you're going to end up working retail. And my parents didn't hammer that hugely, but it was enough of the thing that I just sort of picked up from all other people. And I'd had a very, very good chemistry teacher in high school. Sadly, he has since died, who kind of carried me further than I should have been able to go, because I love the sciences, but I don't have a head for the math. So after spending 2 semesters doing miserably, I said, screw this, I'm going to change my major. Why am I sticking with something that I'm not that good at and is making me unhappy and it's dragging my GPA down into the sewer? So from that point on, it's been pretty solidly history.
What school was that?
UVM.
Oh, UVM.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I live right next to the UVM campus. It's been fun.
Yeah.
So you majored in history over there.
Yep.
I love that Ken Burns documentary, and I actually. My partner, unfortunately, we actually just broke up. But
I'm sorry to hear that.
I know, it sucks. I'm really sad. But anyways, I got her to watch some of that, and it was impressive because she was not the biggest history person or whatever, and even she really enjoyed it. I'm like, you got to see this. And
there's a reason he's one of the prominent documentarians out there, and I haven't watched his American Revolution one that just came out yet.
I was going to ask you
that's
that,
next.
Yeah.
It's on my list. My list is long and ever growing, but I'm sure it's good because he does good work. And I've really enjoyed his Vietnam documentary he did about 10 years ago with Lynn Novick.
I've checked that out.
That's really solid, and I know some of the people that worked on the project with him. Not well, but I know them through I'm a member of the Society for Military History, and several of them are too. So I know them from the conferences that we go to. Ken Burns played a huge part in me getting into history at a fairly young age.
So like when you do the lectures in this class, like it seems like most of it you're doing from memory. Like
a lot of it
is
is
pretty impressive. I don't know, how do you pull that off?
It's easy, just don't forget. No, I have a good memory, all jokes aside, but a lot of it is, honestly, once you've taught a class a couple of times, things kind of you get them You probably note I do check my notes from time to time, usually to pull out specific dates.
Yeah.
But beyond that, yeah, a lot of this is I've just been doing this for as long as I have, that I've got a lot of it memorized.
Yeah. But it's like, it's not a lecture that you've memorized word for word, but
Well,
like
yeah,
the
I'm not reading a
content
script.
itself,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, that's
So are you like pouring over just like reading the history of like whatever, all this stuff we were going through in the 60s or the Cold War or whatever, or just like you just have it, you just know the curriculum that you're teaching, I guess?
I do. Well, not.
How
this
often
is the
do you review all that stuff?
fairly free. Well, it's not. The thing is, it's not so much review, but new books are coming out all the time. So, and where the historical consensus is on this, that, or the other thing does shift. Usually not hugely, but you do get new interpretations of stuff and that rise to prominence and then sometimes die back off again. And I try to stay pretty current on the literature insofar as anyone can. But also part of it is to get to this level of teaching, you have to read a staggering amount of books. Just as an example, and again, this isn't as a brag, but when you're working on a PhD, at the end of your coursework, which usually happens at the end of the second, well, if you've got advanced standing credit, which I did, you'll finish up your coursework at the end of the second year. You then have to take a comprehensive exam, sometimes called a qualifying exam or candidacy exam. The name changes depending on the school you're at. And the way they did it at SUNY Albany, where I did my doctoral work, is you put together a committee of 4 professors. You have to do that yourself. You ask them to sit on the committee, and usually if they like you, they'll say yes. And each of them either gives you or works with you to create a book list of 40 books that you have to, well, you have between this time and when the exam actually happens, you're to have read all the books on your 4 book lists. Meaning, in addition to all the stuff you've done for your coursework and all the stuff you've done in previous classes, you now have 160 books that you have to read for this exam, and they can ask you anything from any of them.
Wow.
We all go kind of
160
nuts.
books?
Yeah. And you usually have about 2 semesters
Keep
to get
going.
that done.
I'm just looking at this to make sure. I just want to make sure I hit, record.
Yeah, we're good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and at the end of that, you have 2 days of written exams and 1 day of oral examination at the end of it. And the written exam is hard, but it's the thing we tend to stress is the oral argument, because sometimes professors think, if they've read your written answers and think you've gotten off easy, that's where they'll try to really shiv you with something obscure. And no one gets through it without, there'll be at least a couple of times you'll say, I'm sorry, I really don't remember what the hell you're talking about. And once or twice, that's fine, because it's just this giant volume of information you're expected to know, and everyone knows you're going to lose some of it. But you develop, to get that done, you develop really good note-taking techniques and really good memorization techniques. So that plays a big part in how I put together my classes and able to make them flow as they do, because I've got a really deep well I can dip into.
So that's pretty interesting. I was going to ask you, well, let's talk a little bit about your book. So
Sure.
can you just tell me a little bit of the story behind it and what is going on in the research that you did for that?
Well, the book also, it is a result of me studying for my comprehensive exams. That's where it came out of. Being an American man my age, I grew up, I watched a lot of really bad action movies in the 80s that are huge fun, but they're crap. I'm not going to pretend they're great cinema.
Yeah, but at the time they seemed like they were really good.
No,
Even
they were
back
kind of
then?
crap back then, but they were fun. They're fun, trashy
Is that
action
like Steven
movies.
Seagal and stuff like that? or
He's
no?
a little bit later. Seagal's more of a '90s action hero. In the '80s, we're talking.
It's fun to see Joe Rogan and other people make fun of guys like Seagal, because they're they're these fake martial artists. They kind of, well, he's a real martial artist, but
He's not a good one though.
He's not Mike Tyson, you know
No.
what I mean?
And he's.
He puts on these displays where people run at him, and he dumps them on the ground and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, haha, this is funny, but you're not actual. You know what I heard about Seagal too is that he would actually injure people on movie sets.
He does have a reputation for that. I think that's more
Yeah.
him being mean than it is him being a particularly good martial artist.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were supposed to be acting, and he would actually put your head through a window.
Yeah.
But
I'm more referring to essentially. There's a subgenre of '80s action movies that are the POW rescue films.
Okay.
Rambo is the second Rambo movie is the biggest name, but it's one of many. There was the MIA series starring Chuck Norris, talking about people who've kind of become walking punchlines.
Yeah.
Uncommon Valor, starring the late Gene Hackman, was another one. And they all are, they draw from, well, we talked about this in our class on Vietnam. The myth that there's a substantial number of American POWs that are still being covertly held by the Vietnamese after the war was over. And in the movies, it's always our brave action hero goes and rescues them and shows that, you know, and subtext being that if only we'd let our men fight, they would have actually won this war, and it's the bureaucrats back home that lost Vietnam, blah, blah, blah. And I always thought this was just America not dealing with the fact that we lost Vietnam. That, you know, it was something that was unique to us. However, when I was reading for my comprehensive exams, I came across evidence in Frank Bies's book first, but then in some others as well, that we're not the first to develop this idea of there being a secret prison camp system that the enemy who has defeated us is still holding our POWs after the war is over. West Germany has a secret camp myth, much like ours does, into the 1950s. It's basically over by 56, but for about 10 years, there's a strong movement in West Germany arguing that the Soviets have retained POWs that we don't know about, and there's lots of them. There's probably hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of men that they've told us are dead or MIA, but they're actually secretly POWs in the Schweigeslager, the silent camps of the Soviet Union. And for about 10 years, there's a strong advocacy movement, much like the American POW MIA movement, to try to get these men back. And so this kind of shocked me. I'm like, I thought this was just an American thing that we did because we were pissy about having lost in Vietnam. No, this is a phenomenon that can crop up under specific circumstances when a nation has lost a war, a war of very questionable morality. Obviously, West Germany, having formerly been part of Nazi Germany, can't argue it was fighting a good war. And given what we were talking about in the class on Vietnam, it's really impossible to argue that America fought anything other than a very dirty, often illegal war in Southeast Asia. Both were defeated. And crucially, both had a very hard time finding anything redemptive to take out of the conflict. Lost wars suck. Let's be honest here. It's never fun to lose a war, even if you're not material damaged by it, like America wasn't after Vietnam. But it was psychologically damaged. And these two nations, and there's a third example I wasn't able to write on because I just don't have the language skills, France after World War I. But West Germany and America both were struggling in the aftermaths of these two defeats to find something good we can take away from this. We need a hero figure of who are going to be our war heroes. And having lost the wars in the ways that they lost them, you can't, your standard veteran who's been to the front and comes home again, he doesn't fit that role very well because one, he lost, and two, especially in the West German case, but to a lesser degree in the American case, he came back with blood on his hands, and not all soldiers do, but I mean, like, he came back having probably committed some atrocities. And so both nations grapple with trying to find a figure, and they both latch on to the POW. Because the POW can be seen as a nationally redemptive figure because he suffers. He's in prison. He's been locked away by the enemy. He continues to passively defy them, but through this captivity, he washes away much of the potential stains on his hands, and thus metaphorically of the nation itself. And in the American instance, the Nixon administration went way out of its way to promote this idea and this myth, to try to keep that constituency from becoming part of the peace movement during the war. And it took on a life of its own afterwards, especially once Watergate happened and it became obvious just how much of the Nixon administration had lied to everybody. But so too, in the late 40s and into the 50s, German POWs, crucially from the Eastern Front, those who had fought in the Soviet Union or Eastern Europe and had been taken captive, when they eventually do come back again, they are seen as the redemptive hero victim figure that Germans can respectably hold up as something good, even though they'd fight under a Nazi flag. This also walked hand in hand in the German instance with what was known as the clean hands myth of the Wehrmacht. The idea that German generals surely promoted after the war that the regular army fought mostly clean, and it was just the SS. They committed all the atrocities, not us. We were too busy fighting the Red Army as soldiers do, doing their duty.
Yeah.
This is, of course, a lie.
Freezing and starving to death in Russia and all that good stuff.
Yeah. The Army's hands were just as dirty as the SS. They carried out tons of atrocities. But until the 1990s, the myth that the Wehrmacht, the regular army, had fought mostly as clean a war as one ever can do was still pretty prominent until there was a moment of historical revision that started in the early 90s in Germany after reunification, and a moving exhibit called The Crimes of the Wehrmacht that toured the country with evidence of just how much the Army had been complicit in the crimes of the Third Reich. That led that myth to die out, to be done away with. But by that point, the West German adoration of the POWs had served its purpose and already kind of sunset, because all the men had come back from the Soviet Union that were ever going to. Whereas the American POW myth persists because our constituency never got that need satisfied. In 1973, only about 600 men come back from captivity. And the Nixon administration had implied there were going to be thousands of men coming back, and implied that all of the MIAs were probably actually POWs. And they weren't. They were dead. They'd been dead the whole time. But the expectations were so high that this small repatriation of a small number of POWs, relatively speaking, did not satisfy the American constituency and help feed into the victimhood narrative around which all of this orbits.
So going back to Germany real quick.
Yeah.
I saw a documentary recently that was mentioning the far right party in them today. What is that?
Alternative for Deutschland, yeah, AfD.
AfD. And that was pretty interesting. Like, they had this one guy they were highlighting. I think it was like PBS or like Frontline, I think.
Frontline,
or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds correct.
So one of those kind of publications, but they were interviewing the guy, and he actually got arrested for using language that was used by the Third Reich. And he kind of almost acted like it was one of those things where they're kind of admitting it, but they're also like, well, I probably didn't know that that's what it was.
Yeah.
But he was more like admitting, because he was saying but what's wrong with saying it? Because the phrase was not like kill all Jews or something like that. The phrase was like all for Germany. Or
Deutschland
something
über
like
alles.
that. Yeah, so
Deutschland über alles was the national anthem.
Yeah.
It predates the Nazi period. It goes back to
We all
Imperial
think
Germany,
Nazis are bad, but do you think it is kind of excessive that Germany would be illegalizing that kind of speech, or that just makes sense?
This is an open debate, and of course it's the question with all political freedoms, regardless of type. If you have a freedom, inevitably some people are going to abuse it. It's the same debate that orbits around the Second Amendment and all the others too. When it comes to speech, it's hard to make a legitimate argument to the degree that some free speech absolutists do, that all speech completely must be out there, because there's some speech that will suck all the oxygen out of a room. The joke goes, if you let one Nazi drink at your bar, you're a Nazi bar now.
Yeah.
Once that door is open, there are some groups out there that are so poisonous and so toxic that if they come into an environment, they're going to ruin it for everybody.
Like the Confederacy, for instance, right? It's like, is there a place for the Confederate flag? I mean, these are very
museums,
hot button issues, and I'm not saying that you're necessarily whatever, but it's interesting to ask a historian and professor.
Well, an important thing to note also is that when it comes to the memorialization of the Confederacy, and especially the flying of Confederate flags, those went away during Reconstruction and for a while afterwards. They only really start to pop up in prominent enough when the civil rights movements get going.
Oh, wow.
They're pushback against. But
before the 60s, right? I mean,
no, they're around before the 60s. You will see them.
There were other civil rights movements.
Yeah, the 60s, earlier phases of the civil rights movement and movements. But it is, it's most of certainly the monuments that are thankfully mostly now coming down to various Confederate leaders. Those don't go up until the 1920s.
Yeah.
There's some before that, don't get me wrong, but the memorialization and feeding into the idea of the lost cause myth and the holding up the antebellum South as somehow this moonlights and magnolias plantation sort of deal.
Yeah.
Real Gone with the Winds kind of stuff.
I tried to watch a movie about the Civil War, and I think it was produced or funded by Ted Turner. You know who that is?
Yes, he was involved in
CNN or whatever.
Ted Turner was involved.
Terrible.
You're probably was it Gods and Generals?
I think so.
About 4 hours long.
Yeah, and I could not watch it, dude. It's
awful.
It was so bad.
Gods and Generals was.
It was very corny the way it was done. Kind of, it didn't strike me as real.
It's not. It's a very, very highly romanticized, mostly following Stonewall Jackson and making him seem like much less of a weirdo than he actually was.
Yeah.
Jackson was a religious fanatic and probably
incredible general, though, huh?
He was good at what he did. Don't get me wrong, But he was also, I mean, in the movie, they have him shake hands with a black man at one point. He never would have done that.
Oh yeah, it doesn't sound like
No,
him.
it's very much a piece of neo-Confederate propaganda. I don't know why Ted Turner was involved himself in it. He's in a cameo in one of the scenes.
What else do you remember about Stonewall? Your memory is so extensive about so many things. It's amazing. But so I remember he was like quirky guy with like bright blue eyes. What else? He did something with his arm or something.
Well, in the movie at one point they have him like he gets necked and he like holds his hand up for like as I've been he gets a cut on his hand from a piece of shrapnel and goes ow and like holds it up.
Yeah, and he like never puts it down. I heard that was a thing about him.
Well, that's it. He did that. Yes, he did that to keep the blood balanced.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He was, again, the man was unstable. He was kind of a nut. He was a religious fanatic. He believed that the South had its own unique destiny above and beyond what most other Confederates even did.
Yeah.
He was a guy who was good at one thing and one thing only, which was he was a battlefield tactician, and he was very good at what he did. And partner that with Lee, and they were very, very effective, and personally quite close. But he was apparently a strange guy who was hard to be around because he viewed the world through this very strange, very fanatically Christian lens, even by the religious standards of the time, which was quite a bit more overtly Christian than America is these days. But yeah.
So during like the Civil War, like what was, in terms of like the regular people, or like so many of the men went off to war, right? And then so was it like almost all these towns were cleared out of men, and then the women are back? What was
I wouldn't say
going
cleared
on
out.
With the people who stayed behind?
This will differ considerably if you're talking about the North and the South, as the South had.
Do you remember Sullivan Ballou too?
Yeah, he's the one that they had do the opening scroll. Yeah, that's the opening
Yeah.
scroll of the Civil War. That's the letter he wrote to his wife the day before he got killed at First Bull Run.
Yeah. So
yeah,
many
dearest
people lost their
Martha,
lives in that war, and I think that's just so important to know. Is like
it's still the
these
bloodiest
things
war in
seem
American
so,
history.
Yeah, it seems so abstract, but a lot of people kind of laid their lives down, and I mean, the course of our history would be so dramatically different had the Union not won the war. I mean, what would that even look like? But you can answer the first question first.
There's a lot to that. But as to population levels, we should also recall that at the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861, there was, ballparking the figures a little here, about 20 million people in the states that make up the North, that will make up the Union, and about 8.5 million in the states that make up the South, and about 3 million and half or so of those are African Americans of one kind or another. Most of them slaves, but there are some free blacks and black people in the South as well. And obviously, they're not going to be useful, as they can't be employed by the South's military because the entire idea of the Confederacy is that we are here to preserve slavery. It's not till the very, very late in the war that, as a desperation move, there's a little bit of talk about freeing slaves to fight for the South, and nothing ever actually comes of it. So Southern towns did often get very depopulated, especially because the South inaugurates conscription. They start drafting men into the Army much earlier than the North does because they have to.
Yeah.
And of course, the South also, unlike the North, is going to be directly invaded. The war, with 2.5 exceptions, do not have. There's only 2 major campaigns and another raid that happen in northern states: the Antietam campaign and the Gettysburg campaign in the east, and a raid into through Kentucky in the west. That's very minor and doesn't really do much. Whereas the rest of the fighting all takes place within Confederate states, and certainly once Sherman starts his activity in 1864. Late 1863, really, and what becomes eventually the Siege of Atlanta and the March to the Sea, Southern towns are going to be directly occupied. And where Sherman marches, fire follows. As he understood, as the South really didn't, wars aren't only fought on battlefields. We can break the Confederacy by demonstrating to its people that its government cannot protect them. Knowing that the South's ideology in large part is, alongside slavery, is the idea that we are fighting defensively in defense of home and hearth. If I burn down your home and your hearth, that shows your government is not legitimate, that it cannot hold up its half of the bargain, and you should have stayed in the Union in the first place.
Yeah.
As war is hell, you cannot refine it, to quote him directly. So you will see towns, especially where he goes, but other places too, where you get populations that are not only reduced because men are off fighting at the front or have died at the front, but also displaced, driven out as refugees.
Yeah.
Or fleeing, not necessarily driven out, but fleeing because the Yankees are coming and we don't want to be here when they get here.
So history, we were talking about the Civil War. We talked in our class the World War II.
Yes.
World War I. So obviously there's been some major wars, and then you can just keep going back, right? I mean, the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great. Yeah. So I'm not saying that the world is always in a constant state of warfare, but there has been, that is a definitely significant part of human history.
It's a major point.
Yeah.
And it's something that we didn't really have a reason for me to bring it up here, but a fantastic book that you might want to check out sometime is Lawrence Keeley's War Before Civilization.
Okay.
It's an anthropological...
Trojan War? Or
what?
No.
It's pre-civilized human conflict.
Oh, okay. So you're talking like cavemen or something, though?
Well,
that's Neanderthals, but...
Maybe not quite that far, but before basically
agriculture?
organized violence in societies we would not, and we probably should, but they would not classically be considered civilized. Backstory on this is up until about the 1990s, anthropologists and archaeologists kind of went out of their way to portray the pre-civilized past as a generally peaceful place.
Yeah.
They were wrong.
And
but
when you say pre-civilized, can you give me like a time frame for that?
yeah, we're talking, well, certainly during the Chalcolithic period.
10,000 BC, something like
Yeah,
that?
way back thousands of years BC, or indigenous peoples prior to European contact.
Okay. Yeah.
There what used to be more than a little noble savage nonsense baked into those fields that mostly is gone now, thankfully. But in the aftermath of the world wars, especially after the atomic bombing of Japan, many in academia, particularly in anthropology and archaeology, honestly kind of felt guilty. They're thinking, Jesus Christ, I mean, this is, we are civilized and look what we've been doing to the world.
Yeah.
Surely there must be some part of our past where we were better than this. Some part of our past before, to borrow from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, before civilization corrupted us. And so they looked to indigenous peoples especially, but also to the distant Stone Age past of Europe prior to the rise of the Mediterranean civilizations, as that must have been the moment before everything went wrong. And so you get examples where they would go, they'd be at archaeological sites and they'd go out of their way to come up with convoluted explanations as to why these villages have like walls around them. Well, they must have been worried about wolves. There's a lot of what look to be arrowheads stuck in there.
Yeah.
And archaeologists would have a hard time getting funding if they advanced a thesis. This is an instance of ancient warfare because the field as a whole wanted to believe that we were better than this at some point. In the 90s, that started to change, and Keeley's book was a big part of it, as he was able to finally put together an ethnographic study showing that no, where human beings go, generally organized violence tends to follow. And that truly pacifist societies, though they do exist, are rarities and generally only pop up under very exacting historical circumstances, usually of isolated communities without aggressive neighbors nearby and with sufficient local resources to look after their own, which just doesn't happen very often in human history. Some peoples in the American Southwest, the Hopi, for example, and other Pueblo people, kind of fit into that role.
Yeah.
And there's other examples you can find in other continents at other times. But by and large, if human groups run into each other, there's a good chance we're going to start hitting each other. So yeah, it has been a very large part of our history.
You just made me kind of think of just the sheer. Well, anyways, going back to that, the follow-up question I had to that amazing anecdote you just gave was that, so moving forward into the future, in terms of the fall of the American Empire, or just prospecting, obviously you're not a fortune teller, but you know a lot about history.
Yep.
So should we be expecting more major wars in the future, or is it the mutual assured destruction? It's just going to be these small proxy conflicts like Ukraine or whatever, which is significant, obviously, or Gaza, which is horrific.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time myself protesting Gaza, but I'm just wondering, protesting what the U.S. government has done there, but yeah, moving forward, are we gonna? Do you think they will see major wars? And what do you think about the concept of America falling by the wayside, the same way the Roman Empire did, or whatever?
That's as you said, I can't. I'm tempted to go with the cop out I used at the end of class and claiming that I studied the past, I can't predict the future. But
yeah,
that's a cop out.
Because I love history too, and I defer to you because I don't. who knows? Like, I don't
There
have
is a
the
big
answer.
degree of that. The future is what is, it is a foreign country. It is unknown to us.
But I think we do tend to look at whatever is going on as having some sense of permanency, when history tells us that there's no such thing.
There's no, yeah. Our past has changed. Usually it changes slowly and incrementally to the point where you finally realize, wait, things are different now. How did that happen? But every so often you will get a sharp inflection point and a sharp break. Obviously, I probably overused that metaphor when we were talking about 9/11, but that was a very cognate example of it. And I'm not sure, given the numbers involved, I'm not sure I would call the Ukraine war all that small anymore. It's geographically somewhat limited, given it's happening mostly in and around the Donbass and that part of eastern Ukraine. But given the length of time, the intensity of the conflict, and the number of men that, especially Russia, but also Ukraine, have poured into this meat grinder, I think this one will end up in the books as a pretty major conflict.
Yeah.
Actually, I was teaching out in Michigan when it first started. I had a one semester gig at Albion College, and the joke was, it used to be Russia had the second best army in the world, and it was Russia had the second best army in Europe, and now it's Russia has the second best army in Ukraine. But the question, I was teaching a World War I class
Say
at that
that
point.
again.
Before the war, Russia has the second best army in the world,
Okay.
second only to the U.S.
Okay.
War starts, Russia has the second best army in Europe.
Okay.
War continues, Russia now has the second best army in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Because they're losing, because they have, by failing to win, they're losing.
Right, and a lot of people had expected them to win relatively easily.
Initially,
That
people
didn't
were saying
happen.
this will be over in 48 hours.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
it's like a week later, I commented to the class, Ukraine still has an air force. I wasn't expecting that. And it shows Putin was not nearly as prepared for the conflict as he thought he was. Part of that's down to the fact that the Russian military, even more so than the Soviet military, is staggeringly corrupt, and a lot of their gear got fallen off the back of a truck and sold to people. I mean, I've had people tell me that, all those surplus night vision goggles people were buying back 20 years ago, they weren't actually surplus. That was Russian generals selling off their equipment and pocketing the cash. And so that may well have contributed to Russia being in the position it is, that it can't pull off what should have been, on paper, a very quick and easy victory. And as an internet commentator, he no longer, he doesn't do shows anymore, but he, back when he was still on, used to say, Russia hasn't even got to the hard part yet. Because what they're really going to suck for them, if they ever get that far, is occupying Ukraine. A Ukrainian populace that does not want them there, that has now been radicalized by these years of conflict.
Yeah.
Because what happens if they win?
Yeah.
Congratulations, you now have to incorporate Ukraine into Greater Russia somehow, with this large, probably permanently embittered population.
A lot of people would probably leave too, right?
Yeah, but a lot of them won't.
And then they're going to be insurgents or whatever.
There will almost certainly be an insurgency. There will certainly be, there will probably be resistance elements that stay behind even if the country falls.
So do you have some historical figures or people, stories or so on that kind of stand out to you that you really admire, inspire you? For instance, today I thought of it when you were reviewing what we went over in class. I watched a 3-part series on FDR. And he could barely stand and he could barely walk.
Well, actually, he couldn't walk.
You watch those videos of him walking, and it's he would swing his leg. It was crazy.
Well, he has to because he was literally standing on his leg braces.
Yeah.
He had these steel braces that he'd lock in position, and basically his hips are riding on this steel that's going down and connecting with his shoe, and he's shifting his weight to simulate to move, but to simulate walking. He couldn't actually move his legs.
Yeah, and
but
one
there's much
guy
admirable about
I'm
him.
really obsessed with is Julius Caesar, but not that he's necessarily a beacon of morality.
Oh, no.
He's just somebody who I have found a fascination with. I think a lot of people, it's just certain figures will stick out to you.
Well, he's one of the standard
historian.
darlings of destiny that sort of loom larger than life over
right.
the
Just
periods
the
that they're in.
story is so irresistible to me. I constantly look at it over and over again. I'm this is crazy. And then you got with Cleopatra or whatever. So whether it be people who really inspire you just for their greatness of their personality, or just even maybe they're not the greatest person, but they're still,
Yeah, there's a lot.
those ones.
the historians, we sometimes have the same problems that biographers almost always suffer from, is the danger of getting too close to a subject. Because there are so many fascinating figures out there that if you're not careful, you can find yourself falling in love and thinking, man, this guy's so awesome and amazing, and then you ignore all the horrible stuff that's also associated.
Yeah.
But
Like he killed 1 million people. Like,
yes,
oh,
he also
but
committed a genocide on the Gaulish, but
you're like, but that's so cool. He forgave this guy and he rose to the top of the society and stuff. And Mary Beard talks about that. Have you heard of her? She's a Roman historian, British, but
I know Mary Beard's work.
Yeah,
yes.
she's great, and she kind of talks about that degree of separation. Where like somehow time allows us to admire people who like could be a monster, really. You know,
if they existed today, absolutely. That's that's classic military dictatorship moves right there. And he non-trivially contributed to the collapse of the Roman Republic. And he's not the most responsible, but he's among the responsible for bringing that down and inaugurating the empire period that follows it. Not that Rome hadn't already built an empire by that point.
And there's a great book. It's called Caesar and Cato. I can't remember the actual title, but it's about Caesar and Cato. I was reading that at Barnes & Noble, and just really cool because they're just contrasting like who they were as people and how much they hated each other, which was quite a bit.
Yeah, the domestic politics of Rome is there's this fascinating, usually metaphorical, occasionally literal knife fight.
Yeah.
Of period from the Roman period.
Any period. Would go
well, no,
ahead.
this.
I do like Romans though, especially that period is one of my areas of like expertise. I say that in quotations.
There's have you read Ghosts of Cannae?
No.
It's about the Second Punic War when Hannibal runs rampages all over Italy for about a decade.
But they eventually destroy Carthage as a result
it's
of that.
At the end of the Third War is when Carthage gets sacked for good.
Third Punic War.
Yeah, there's three.
Okay.
The Second Punic War is when Hannibal's doing his thing and comes close to winning.
He actually makes it all the way to Rome.
Yeah.
Like
he doesn't get to
elephants
Rome, but he gets
and all
into
that
Italy.
Okay.
And he annihilates Roman armies one after another, but the Romans just keep raising new ones. Eventually, the Roman general that manages to finally figure out how to win is Scipio Africanus. He's a figure I enjoy reading about from the period. He realizes the way to get Hannibal out of Italy is to take the fight to the enemy, to send instead of confronting him in the field, sail across the Mediterranean, as Rome had naval superiority, and lay siege to Carthage. Thus, Hannibal will be forced to bring his armies back to home territory, and at least we can fight this fight in somebody else's country. And for many different reasons unrelated to that, Hannibal ultimately loses at the Battle of Zama. Carthage sues for peace, and Hannibal goes into exile for a while. He comes back briefly during the Third Punic War, and then eventually he gets captured and executed. But in Roman domestic politics, I've admired the writings of Cicero, though he's not as accessible these days because thousands of years ago. But there's a lot of figures out there that you can read any number of fascinating things about. Yeah.
How about like greatest generals? Can you just name a few of those? It doesn't have to be Roman, but
well, in American history, this is the other job I have. I would
put Alexander the Great.
Well, he has to be on a list because he's a great.
Yeah, and he never lost. He basically got poisoned or like died of sickness or something.
He got most accounts say that he got a fever of some kind. There is a minority view that he was poisoned. Yeah.
But you were going to say American.
In American military history, I've been doing a lot. I work a research job as well as teaching. I work I'm working on a project with the George C. Marshall Foundation. He was Army Chief of Staff during World War II, and eventually, after World War II, he was Secretary of State and then Secretary of Defense. And he was close friends with Eisenhower, who never really had an example to demonstrate whether he was a really solid battlefield commander, but my God, was the man an effective organizer. And his ability to juggle personalities, especially, is a large part of what kept the Anglo-American and French alliance going during World War II. Because he's got all these other larger-than-life figures with gigantic egos that he needs to get along with each other. He's got Charles de Gaulle, the head of the fighting French, and the de facto leader of the French government in exile, who has a massive, massive ego and was French and had that sort of stereotypical, condescension towards Americans and towards the British. He's got to keep Field Marshal Montgomery in hand, one of the major British commanders. He's got to juggle Churchill, who could be a very pleasant guy to be around, but could also be a real pain in the ass if he wanted to be. He's got a maniac like George Patton he's got to keep on a short leash, and has to do a number of things because George will not stop running his damn mouth throughout the war. And he manages to do it, to keep all of these chainsaws in the air and to coordinate and organize, not single-handedly, of course, the massive efforts that will lead to the Normandy landings and the liberation of Western Europe, which, yes, is a minority effort compared to the firestorm of the Eastern Front, but it's not nothing either. And Eisenhower he's lauded for what it is, but I don't think he's ever quite given as much credit as compared to some of the battlefield commanders, who, well, Patton especially, often get sort of artificially held up as really, really great because, yes, they did do great things, but they were, a smaller, discrete part of a very big, very complicated story. And yeah, that would be definitely a big one. I would also argue, if you're talking about the American Civil War, most of the Confederate leadership gets far more credit than it generally deserves. Lee still has a cult around him that he was the greatest battlefield general of all time. He was a very good man. The problem was he could win.
Very good general or very good man?
Yeah, very good general. I'm sorry, you're right. He was actually kind of a shithead as an individual, but
yeah, I don't know much about him as a person.
Well, he was a slave
owner.
He was a slave owner and a pretty brutal one, even by the standards of the day. Not the worst, but he was not slow to have people flogged.
So while we're on that, really quick, so we always talk about you can't really judge a historical figure by like modern standards too strictly, because it's a little bit, not fair maybe. So, but to what extent can we do that? Because abolition was kind of part of their vernacular at the time.
Well, that's exactly it. We don't need to judge him by the standards of our times. We can judge him by the standards of his own time, and he still comes up wanting.
Yeah, and he could have fought for the Union, but he chose not.
And he was offered command of the Union Army in 1861.
Right. He said, "No, Virginia."
The commander, it's even worse than that. The American commander-in-chief, Chief General at the time, Winfield Scott, a very old man by that point in his life, a hero from the War of 1812, had been Lee's protege. Lee had been his protege, pardon me. He had been his patron prior to this point. And during the crisis in the end of the 1850s and the run-up to the 1860 election, I forget who he was talking to, but he said to someone, if I was on my deathbed and the President of the United States came to me and said that tomorrow a great battle will be fought to decide the freedom of the American nation and asked my opinion as to who should lead our forces, I would say with my dying breath, let it be Robert E. Lee. And the President, Lincoln, did offer him command of the Union Army. And he decided instead, he asked for, can I have a night to think about it? Jumped on a horse and fled south into the growing Confederacy after very, very hastily resigning his commission in the American Army, because he was a active colonel in the Army at that point. The best answer I can give you as to why he made the choice. I mean, he often talks about, Virginia, I love Virginia, I could not have fought against it. No, he wanted to be the George Washington figure of the Confederacy. He wanted to be the foundational general who won Southern independence for this new slave republic. He didn't have a problem with succession, and as to his great attachment to Virginia, yes, he was attached to his state, but even members of his own family, some of them stayed loyal to the Union, so it's a road he could have gone down. He chose not to. And because, yes, he was a very good battlefield commander, he gets an outsized reputation. And the lost causers puff him up as like the greatest thing ever, because it's it's part of how they explain away the fact that the South got its ass kicked up one wall and down the other during that war. He could win spectacular victories, but he couldn't win cheap victories. And the South didn't have the manpower to win expensive victories like that. It's the same reason why, until fairly recently, Grant had the reputation of being sort of this belligerent drunk who just sort of bludgeoned the South with his own face until finally. No.
Okay.
He was
that was the impression I got.
Well, it still maintains. The problem is.
It was like, but I said this in class, that look, if you have more resources than the other side, you have more factories and so on and so forth, more people even at your disposal, then why not use that tactic of just keep throwing people at your opponent until they're overwhelmed?
And sometimes there are some problems that you can't solve without just throwing more men at it. That's not an illegitimate thing to do.
So there was that aspect to some degree.
Yeah, and the South did it too, is also the thing. It's not like the South wasn't trying the same thing. They just didn't have as many bodies to do it with. The thing was, Grant's reputation basically gets tarnished because for Lee to be great, he has to be small. And the writers of Civil War histories immediately following the war tended to be ex-Confederates. Those guys got their memoirs out like the next day after Appomattox. Slight exaggeration. And in all of them, the South was right to succeed. It wasn't about slavery. And we didn't lose, we just wore ourselves out beating on the Yankees so much. It constructs this mythic version of the war because that's less painful than dealing with what actually happened. And that persists for a very long time in American history. You'll still find lost causers out there today. Thankfully, there's not nearly as many. Grant's reputation got badly tarnished through all of that. Him being a drunk is owned down to basically 2 instances that happened during the war because he was a lightweight. He couldn't handle his booze. So he normally didn't drink.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought of Grant, he was drinking all day.
Nope. He had it after the Mexican War, he got stationed out west away from his wife and he basically fell into a deep depression and self-medicated for a while. And that's what led him initially to being forced to resign his commission in the 1840s. Yeah, it was the 1840s. He comes back into the Army once the Civil War starts. But he knew that he knew he couldn't handle his drink. He'd had instances where, 3 beers in and he's on the floor. So he joined a temperance society when he'd been younger. He decided he knew what his weaknesses were, so normally he didn't drink. I mean, he might have a glass of wine with dinner, but that would be it. And most nights, not even that. But during the war, there's a couple of times when, one during the siege of Vicksburg and the other, I forget, but times when he's not really much is going on, and he's kind of frustrated because he's not really doing anything, and he goes on a bender. But normally he was dry as sand. He normally didn't drink much at all. But these instances, plus his depressive episode after the Mexican War, were those are the kernels of reality about which the mythology of Grant as the belligerent drunk is invented later on by lost cause historians who are sympathetic to the Confederacy and thus want to make their side look better and the North look worse.
So we could wrap it up soon. We could talk for a while, but I really appreciate it. It's been really cool to talk to you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
What are some of your favorite films and shows that are historically related? And book, you could mention a couple of books too.
Yeah, I really, really liked the recent Netflix readaptation of All Quiet on the Western Front.
Okay.
It's not a scene for scene matchup with the first 2 movies, but it gets the core story perfect. And it's cinema.
That was a crazy war.
Oh yeah.
World War I, right?
Yeah, the cinematography of the newest All Quiet on the Western Front is astoundingly good. Whoever did the soundtrack work knew how to bake dread into scene. It's almost a horror movie at times.
Yeah,
like you hear
the
the bass line stings and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
And then the trenches loom up in the
foreground.
foreground.
Is that one that came out very recently?
2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, I think I might have seen that.
I think it's still available on Netflix.
I think I watched that one.
Yeah. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I still haven't seen Oppenheimer. I've been meaning to. It's on my list. I haven't had a chance.
So quickly, because now I have a subject or a question. World War I and World War II, me and my mom were trying to discuss this. Which one was worse?
Well, that's how do you define worse?
I was kind of saying it would be even worse to fight in World War I because you're in the trenches and stuff.
It would be a worse experience to be a fighting man on the Western Front, I would agree, because of the utter pointlessness of it. There is some trench fighting in World War II, not to the same degree, and it doesn't last nearly as long. And
the reason why they were so different is because they just abandoned that style, or they had new technology, or
new evolution of technology is a big part of it. We talked about in class when Heinz Guderian and the German innovators between the wars are among the many. They're not the only ones, but they're among the many thinking, when the next war comes, we're going to have the tools we only barely had in the last war in embryo form. The aircraft, the armored vehicles, the submarines, all the stuff that existed in World War I, but were still kind of in their embryonic states and didn't really make that big of a contribution, have since matured. These technologies are with us now, and others besides. And That will allow us to restore mobility to battlefields, and they hope to win quick victories that aren't going to cost us a devastating 4-year quagmire. So as to the experience, if you ask me, put me down, what would be the worst front to be dropped on either of the two wars, I would say the Western Front is certainly a contender. I would also argue if you were, say, a member of the 6th Army in Stalingrad after the Kessel is encircled, that's right up there too. Some of the Japanese garrisons that just get marooned on islands during the island hopping campaign and basically half starve to death before the war finally ends, that's definitely up there. Underappreciated, I think, is the fighting that goes on the Burma front between the Anglo-Indian forces and also some Chinese nationalist forces versus Japan. Also American troops are there too. And the Gurkha expeditions into the interior, those were pretty miserable.
So you got All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah.
Give me a couple others.
Let's see, what are some other good movies I've watched recently?
Or shows. Did you ever see Rome on HBO?
Yes, that was a lot of fun.
That was good. It was really good.
They sexed it up more than they needed to, but it's HBO, so I understand why they did it.
You made it all the way through?
Yeah.
I love that show.
It's a great show.
I really like the part towards the end where like Mark Antony is on his like last days. There's just something so poetic about it. He's in Egypt, he's like half dressed Egyptian. Yeah. He's like, I've got to stab myself. He's like, give me a Roman sword. Like, I need the gladius for this,
Yeah, because Octavius is on his way, and it's everything's about to cave in on itself.
Yeah.
Downfall was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Downfall.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned Deadwood in class. I tried to watch it a little bit. I didn't get too far.
Yeah, Deadwood was huge. It was a great deal of fun, and it's a heavily fictionalized. But most of the characters that are played on screen were actual individuals. Seth Bullock was a real person. Al Swearingen was a real person. Solomon Starr was a real person. Wild Bill clearly was, as was Calamity Jane.
Is that one of the things you're kind of have a particular interest in? Because I can never even tell because you know so much about all this stuff. But like the Wild West, that kind of fun subject.
I enjoy the Wild West. I'm not. Some of my friends are more deeper into the lore than I am, but it's this period in American history where we've got the history of what happened, but we've also got the tall tales. And most of them are based on something that did happen. I mean, Paul Bunyan didn't exist, but there's a lot of tall tales that are based on actual individuals and larger-than-life figures. Buffalo Bill Cody was a real person, and so were all these others that lived these massively outsized lives in this relatively short period of time, basically from about the end of the Civil War till about the 1890s, so 20-ish years.
You say outsized lives, and that reminds me of a really cool comment my friend made where he said, back in the day, quote unquote, back in history, there was less people on Earth, so each of their personalities took up more space. Right?
Well, that is my one way to look at it.
There's a sense of we love history because the people did like wild, crazy things that we may never get the chance to do in our own lives.
Well, and also at the same time, for every Wild Bill out there, there's dozens of, I grew up on a farm, I worked the farm, and that's my life.
And
during
that's a great point.
Yeah. There's, for every Julius Caesar, there's, Varus, what's his name, who works on a farm. And history never knew him and never will know him.
Yeah.
And there's dozens more of that guy than there are the bigger ones. And we know more, because of mass literacy, we know much more of more people's stories.
We say the same thing about the mafia with the Sicilians, granted, there's always some sort of connection. Like I mentioned my great uncle was a driver for Al Capone. Yeah. And that's just a cool family fact. I mean, Al Capone is an insanely famous, notoriously rich, crazy gangster. He was one of the biggest earners ever in terms of like gangster history or whatever. But with that said, people always bring up the mafia right away.
I try not to, but I know
a lot of
people do.
Sicilian people are just regular working people. They're not out robbing people for, it is a kind of a stereotype that nowadays there's a cultural generational shift, right? Like my generation, we kind of like admire it because we think it's kind of cool, We're like, oh yeah, The Godfather, The Sopranos. Talk about good shows. I mean, The Sopranos.
That was a hell of a good show.
You've watched that?
Yeah,
it's fantastic. Yeah. But The Godfather is considered by some to be the greatest movie of all time.
It's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, but that's totally up into interpretation. Yeah. But regardless, the point I'm getting to is that there is a generational like romanticization of it. Whereas if you bring it up to my mom or my nana or nanu, they're like, we hate the fact that we remember like not being able to get a job because
Like,
we were
oh,
dirty
you're a
Sicilian,
Sicilian, that means you're a crook. So
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
and like the number of slurs and all that stuff. So,
yeah, I wasn't going to bring him up, but yes.
but it's like, it's to me, it's not as much of a sensitive subject. Granted, if someone was just being overtly like racist about it or whatever, insulting me, my pride would kick in and I would be offended. But it's not something that I've personally like really lived through or experienced that much. I think by the time I came around, first of all, I'm not from like an Italian neighborhood, and number two, it wasn't some sort of like culturally dominant narrative that I had to deal with. So,
well, and also there's been enough time. We've talked about this in class that of our two ethnic heritages, we're white people that didn't used to be white. Now, if you go back far enough, we are not inside that circle yet. We both are now.
My dad's side is obviously Rhodesian, which is another.
Well, that's even more complicated.
That's like
but
white, but
yes.
yeah. But no, my mom,
Yeah, and it's in America, that's the question of who counts and who doesn't is a constant and open one. It's one of the reasons I brought it up so many times in class of whose counts as us, who isn't. Who is coming in, who is being pushed out.
I can't remember how I got on that subject, though.
We were talking about movies, I think.
Oh, yeah. And the people, the way that what they're associated with.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I can't, but there was something you were talking about before that. But, another one I love is Vikings.
That was a great series,
Did you see that
I
as
watched
well?
that on the History Channel when it first came out.
Okay, yeah.
I haven't watched all of the second one.
I find
Valhalla.
Vikings to be really cool and fascinating.
Yeah.
Because once again, like, they just do things that are so badass.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how we got on that subject. The glamorization of like this like extreme masculinity or whatever, right?
Well, yes, and at the same time, at least in Vikings, and the show does a pretty good job of this. You do have these big burly dudes out wailing on each other with battle axes and whatnot, but you also see that despite that, this is not a hugely it's not nearly as patriarchal a society as one would expect from that image, that women have considerable agency and considerable rights. And some of them, they genuinely are living the life, have chosen to leave domesticity to walk a different path. And that's seen as socially acceptable.
As warriors.
Yeah, as
like
shield maidens and things like that.
So
Yeah, Lagertha and the others.
Yeah.
And she was a real person. I don't know how close
Wow.
to her life
Yeah.
that show takes her, tell you the truth.
Yeah, that show is more historical than I realized at first.
Well, it's Ragnar Lothbrok was a real figure. Rollo was a real figure. They weren't brothers.
Like
They
Rollo
lived about
became the
100
Duke
years
of Normandy.
apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
He ends up becoming a Norman
Rollo's
prince.
even more of a real figure, I think, than Ragnar. Like,
They both existed, but we know much more about Rollo because he ends up as part of the Norman aristocracy, and
Right.
so there's people to write it down.
Frankia and
Yeah.
all that. Yeah. That's where I'm at in the show right now, is he's kind of, his wife finally, like, spoiler alert, his wife finally is accepting him
Yeah.
in Paris, and Ragnar just tried to come back into Paris, and he, like, repelled them.
Yeah.
And etc. His character is very interesting because he, you never really know
Well,
if you like him or not. Is he a good guy? Is he not a good guy?
In the first couple of seasons, there's this constant, or maybe it's just the first, I forget. There's this constant tension between the two of them that they've cast them as brothers, even though they weren't in real life. That Rollo is constantly in Ragnar's shadow, and is he going to move out and be his own man? Is he going to keep working with his brother? Is he going to break off? Is he legitimate about this Christian conversion? Is he just doing it for show? What's going on with the guy? And at the end, we get our answer. He makes his choice and ends up a count in Normandy. But yeah, I enjoyed that. It was well written. It was pretty well acted.
Yeah.
For a fictionalized work, I enjoyed it quite a bit. That was a great show.
Definitely. Well, man, it's been so great talking to you. I think we got some
pleasure.
really good content in there and stuff. So maybe another time I could send you an email or something, see where you're at.
Feel free.
Stay in touch. That'd be great.
Yep.
Mr. Gallagher.
As long as I'm still working at CCV, my stuff here should continue to function.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. It was great taking your class, and I'm really glad that we got to sit down and just talk about history for a while.
Sure thing.
Super cool, man. Yep. Appreciate you, boss. Thank you, sir.
Yep. Here's your mic.
Yeah. That was fun.